All right. What are we talking about today?
Yeah, so I have a number of questions for you. So I'm not a vegan, by the way, but
Hmm.
I especially agree with ending factory farming and stuff like that. So, but I'm really interested in kind of, looking at the limits of veganism, I guess.
Yeah.
And so I kind of have some questions with that. And one of the first ones, which is something I've seen you touch on in some of your other videos, but you haven't like really gone all in.
Hmm.
Although you did just post a question earlier today on it, almost is what do you guys think about eating insects? Because to me, they're just a heavily underutilized source of protein. And at least personally, I don't see insect suffering as something that is as atrocious as, you know, a cow or chicken or something like that. So,
Hmm. Yeah. So I think a big part of it, at least for me, comes down to what we understand. And so I believe there is some science that has come in on the idea that insects feel pain. But I also saw something recently talking about certain insects like ants, where if they have a broken leg, they'll walk as if it doesn't affect them. And so so for me, my idea of why I'm a vegan and how I view veganism is the idea of not making anything suffer. And as you've probably seen in other stuff that I've talked about, if me and you were on an island, I'd probably kill you and eat you. But I'm sure if we weren't on an island and I wasn't starving, I wouldn't kill you. So same thing with any other animals. If I'm under the impression I don't need to hurt any animals, and I've not consumed an animal product in 8 years, and I feel fine. Um, and so for me, it's just I don't want to make anything suffer that doesn't need to. So if there was if I didn't live in the information world that I live in now, I would probably have assumed animals don't or insects don't feel any pain at all. And throughout all of human history, whether I needed them or not, if I wanted them, I probably would have consumed them because I wouldn't have thought they felt anything. Because like you can go up to any mammal and poke it with a tack, like say a cow, poke it with a tack, and it's gonna whimper, cry a little bit, a little blood's gonna come out. We recognize that as a feeling that we don't want to feel ourselves. But insects are so small and they don't make noises, or at least not that kind of noise. And so anyways, it really would come down to the science for me. If I think we're probably close to like chimpanzees, where they eat 75% fresh fruit, usually figs. And I'm guessing humans are probably designed to do fine on the majority fruit, but then also nuts to get like fats and proteins and stuff like that. And they eat maybe 4% of their diet is insects. I don't know if you've seen it. It's really cool. They put a stick into like a hollowed out log and they'll pull it out and termites are on it and they'll eat it. It grosses us out because what we're used to, we're so pampered with what's available. But if I felt like naturally I was missing some nutrient and something, an instinct took over that made me think this insect would take care of that, then I'm fine with it. But if we don't need it and they do suffer, I don't personally think I should or we should.
okay. So going back to one of the things you said a little bit earlier with the ant legs, and let's assume that they don't that we can prove they don't feel pain.
Mhm.
So like, and what if we like made a company where they just like process ant legs and grind it into some sort of flour or something?
Mhm.
Would you have any issue with that?
No, not I don't think so. And maybe I just haven't thought about it. I think a lot of issues and things that we work on, we don't have certain thoughts on it because we haven't thought about it. At this point, I would say I wouldn't have any issue. I think at this point, I would say same would go for a cow. If we found out that a cow couldn't feel pain, or let's say there was a way to clone a cow, but when we clone it in the cloning process, we remove pain receptors. And so now all these cows that are just roaming around that are essentially like zombies, they can't feel anything, but they have their natural instincts to eat and whatnot. if we remove that suffering element, and then also an element of suffering could be based on emotional attachments, like when you pull a baby calf away from a cow, the mom cries out, and so it has this natural like mama bear but mama cow instinct of taking care of its baby. I'm guessing once that baby's grown up enough, it's like dogs where they essentially forget their kid even exists. And I don't think adult mammals, most of them, I don't think most of them make many connections. So if there was no pain receptors, no feelings, and if there was no emotional connection, and we have no reason to think they have any care to live, they're just existing off their instincts, I wouldn't see any problem even killing that cow.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's really interesting. Cool. So one of the other things is with so I'm generally pro hunting. I really think that it is I mean they're animals that have lived their entire lives being happy and healthy and completely free, doing, you know, by definition, basically what they would have done, you know, with or without us. And that, like, yes, they do suffer, but it's for such a small amount of time that I have no problem with it. And so yeah, and I know that there's like a lot of vegans like disagree with it. And I wondering your take on that. Is eating, you know, like a deer or something okay? And one of the other reasons that I'm definitely for it, and I think even if I was vegan, I would be, is that and a lot of, like, first of all, uh the animal's death from a gunshot or something is going to be far less painful than any natural way that it would die otherwise. And so that's one thing I want to, like, because if it's not going to die of gunshot, the gunshot's going to die of disease. It's going to die of you know, the cold, right? The elements, like every other natural way is a lot less suffering. And so, and like you kind of mentioned, I don't know if I agree with any sort of like this inherent right to life. And so, but yeah, what's your take on that?
Yeah, so I heard something recently that I thought was interesting about how, not that we should appeal to nature, but one interesting thing with nature is predators will pick off the weaker of animals. So if an animal like an antelope or something breaks a leg, or gets old and just is slow, then those are the ones that predators will pick off. And so I think there is some kind of a negative element if we are shooting a deer because we like the size of its antlers or something. And so we're getting the ones that would be maybe in their prime, that should be off, you know, living their lives, doing their things. So I would be probably more in favor. I don't know if there's a taste difference for getting an elderly deer or getting a deer that's like hurt and limping versus getting. So I don't know much about hunting. So that's an interesting element I think worth thinking about. But then you made a comment that was very interesting. What was it? It was maybe it was just the idea that it would be a better death than most of the deaths they have. Um yeah, well, first of all, I'd say it's way better than factory farming. If I could convince everybody that eats animals to go hunting, I would. Especially because you have an element of, you have to kill it yourself. You have to see this blood, this thing. I don't know how many people would kill less based on this idea, but the amount of meat that people consume just with whatever's at fast food and whatnot, it's their eyes are so closed to what's happening. They don't know what these factories are doing. They don't have to do it themselves. I think that's an interesting element. Um, so yeah, I guess I wouldn't care as much. I still do care about the suffering element. I have not been convinced that it's necessarily healthy for us to eat animals. It seems to me like our bodies are designed to not to do something more like primates do, where it's 75% fruit and then nuts and whatever else. But yeah, as a moral thing, it seems so much less. Well, what I'd be curious about is your average gunshot to a deer. What's the difference between that and the pain that would happen from like a bear or a mountain lion getting that deer, which is possibly what you meant by their deaths will be worse otherwise. So yeah, again, I wouldn't do it myself, but I'm not totally against it, but it reminds me of something I've been meaning to bring up to vegans, which I will probably get a lot of hate for. But part of why I'm doing my channel is to talk about topics like we're talking about, where we break outside the box and think of different ideas. And if we could say put like harmless chips inside of cows and then have these cows just roaming kind of like deer do, just roaming this grassy, full of trees, just like kind of nice sanctuary nature area. And we know that they don't have any need for living, like they don't have any ideas of the future, and they have no connections to each other. If we could just press a button and they instantly die and fall over, and there's no suffering and they're just dead, because of however that chip works, then I think I would be in favor of that, or at least I would need some convincing to assume otherwise. I'm just not convinced. I don't think I don't think there's anything that makes it right for us to put something like that in harm, to take this animal and to force it into an area where it can't leave, and then to extract its milk from it, and then to use its milk products. Like I think we're just going beyond what we probably should do when we know better. So sorry, I got off track, but hunting, yeah, I have to be in favor of it, especially compared to what we have now. Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah. And yeah, I like similarly, like another thing is I think, and I'm from Wyoming, and I think that we just passed and so this is, you know, I guess why I bring some of these topics up is because they're a lot more relevant to me than they may be for the average person. So but yeah, like I think we just recently or at some point have passed a law where you know, if there's, you know, a dead animal on the side of the road, you know, like deer or elk, you can go get a roadkill tag. And so you can use that meat and it's not going to waste. And so at this point, you know, the animal's already dead, the stuff like it's already suffered, and nothing you do is going to reduce the suffering. So I'd like to assume that you'd be okay with eating that meat.
Yeah, no, I've definitely thought about this before, and I've seen things involving it. Yeah, I think the only downside at all would be the normalizing of eating meat element of it. But same thing would go for humans. So I believe if humans eat other humans, there's elements that can actually be unhealthy for you. Like I think cannibals are known to have gone crazy because something within the meat. But if you imagine that, like, say, human meat is as good for humans as deer and cow and all this stuff, logically, I'd have to side with the idea that when when people die, especially since I think people should just be cremated anyways to not waste all the space for graves, we should probably at least use that human meat for pets or something. It seems so wasteful. But yeah, if something dies and it died of a complete accident. Now I think there is an issue where our modern inventions are harming things. Like I think we should make it to where a deer can't get in the road. I don't know how we should do this exactly. I don't think we should block ourselves off from nature in the sense that I love going hiking. I don't know if Wyoming is a good place for like hiking and camping, but we can go to nature. But I think we should try to, since we invented cars and roads, we should try to prevent nature from being able to get harmed by our inventions. But yeah, if something dies of natural causes or a complete accident, definitely, I do not think it's anti-vegan to eat it.
Gotcha. Cool. So yeah, and I guess this is something that earlier with the cows we were already kind of talking about, but I still want to bring it up anyway because I think it's interesting. So basically, I have this idea that like, let's say there was some sort of being, just say it's an alien, and it is as intelligent to us as we are to cattle, right? Like an order of magnitude higher in
Mhm.
intelligence. And let's say that it decided to, farm and eat people. And so and it's just like, I guess, is that morally right? And I would say, like, let's say like they gave me a deal where, I'm allowed to live for 50 years, and I'm basically allowed to do whatever I would have done without them. Right. But then, at year 50, they're gonna take a year, fatten me up, and then they'll kill me. And I like your idea before, the idea of like, but they'll kill me without pain, and I'd say, like, as long as it's like takes less than 2 seconds of suffering, like, just a small amount. I have no issue with it. Now, I would almost take that choice over my life, because like, they'd provide shelter, they'd provide food, they'd provide all my needs, and then I can just focus on doing the things that I want to do. But I don't think that that's even the standard we should be comparing it, because I would certainly take that life over not existing at all. And so, yeah, I don't know. What's your thought on that?
Yeah. Well, I don't have many thoughts on the not existing part, because I mean, if we don't exist, we wouldn't know, like, but since I do exist, I like existing. I hate the idea of dying. I want to live forever. But if we know that animals in the wild mostly have horrible lives, in a sense, like they probably enjoy a lot of their lives, but it's so much of it is trying to survive. It's if you look at like rates on documentaries, they'll talk about like kangaroos. It's like 1 out of every 10 will survive past like a couple months, because like eagles will take them and all this stuff. So yeah, most animals have these horrible lives. So if we didn't develop what we have, if we didn't have the abundance we have, at least in like the Western world, and we were just like having, say, just horrible human lives, and we were offered, you can live for 50 years and we'll offer you all this great stuff, I would take it in a heartbeat. But compared to this option I have now, which I'm hoping I'll have a good time when I'm 55 and 60 and so on, I still do feel like I wouldn't want to sacrifice this time. So I think it's complicated, the idea of we can give them a better life. Like, I don't think we should even own pets, but a lot of the pets we have would have better lives with us than in nature. But I just don't think we should meddle with that based on like consent reasons and whatnot. But it's not a thing I push. It's just a personal opinion. So if I was trying to convince somebody to go vegan, or even to do something like hunting instead of factory farming, it's definitely not a push I have for people to not own pets. But yeah, so aliens come, they're smarter than us. That's possibly my favorite argument I've ever used for why people should go vegan, is because you shouldn't force something to do something it doesn't want to do. But how nature works, you got to do your best to survive. In the same sense, I'd kill a human to survive. If aliens want to kill me to survive, they might try it out. I would call it, my personal current definition of something being moral or immoral is just based on the intentional causing of suffering. So what I do now is, if there's intentional causing of suffering, I call it immoral, and then in some cases I consider it justified. So if you're trying to kill me and I kill you in self-defense, and I cause you suffering while I'm killing you, then it's justified. I think it's fine that I did that, but I still think it's immoral in the sense that I cause suffering. Lions, to survive, they need to kill zebras. I consider the act of killing the zebra immoral, but I consider it justified in the sense that I get why the lion's doing it. So I would not consider it moral for the alien to give me a great life for 50 years and then to nicely take me out. And I personally wouldn't consider it justified, because I'd be dying. But if the alien took you out, it would depend on how much that alien needed it. If the alien needed human to survive the way a lion needs zebra or gazelle, then I might consider it justified and glad it's you and not me. But but if that alien could either have you or non-sentient things that would keep it equally healthy, I would think it's not justified that the alien killed you.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think that's a really fair assessment. Um, trying to think what else yeah, I guess that, like, I was also kind of thinking about it in terms of like um, if the aliens are like hunting people, and to me that just sounds like fun. So, but I can see it would be like horrifying for, you know, humanity and stuff, but
Mhm.
you know, it's just, you know, sounds like it's just straight up science fiction. So I'd honestly wouldn't mind like if it's happened. And I'm in a universe where that's already the case and I'm not harming
Mhm.
you know, the rest of humanity on Earth. I'd probably go for that. It just sounds like a really
Well,
interesting change of pace in life.
yeah, no, and I think we have to separate that from how we view morals, because I agree with you. There's something within us humans, or at least me and you and a lot of people, that enjoy weird elements of almost maybe violence and survival. Like everybody has this fantasy of a zombie apocalypse would at least be interesting, because if you had guns that you could pick them off like you do in a video game, there's something like thrilling about doing this thing but knowing that they're zombies, so you're not harming anyone but you're getting the bad guy. So I'd see that element of what you're talking about, and I think that is an interesting, strange thing within humans. It's probably why humans had like gladiators for so long, and then now we have football. We want to have elements of release, while at the same time we don't want to harm ourselves. But yeah, it's pretty interesting. I don't know what I would think about this alien situation, but I know that I want to survive, and I know that I don't want to be harmed. So I guess I view anything that can be harmed or want to survive in the way I do. I want to at least think it through and do the best I can.
Gotcha. Um, yeah, I don't know. And I guess that's just kind of more for fun, than anything
Right?
else.
Yeah.
Like, and yeah, I wasn't trying to, it's just, you know, and I guess it is still relevant to the conversation because, you know, like we, you know, in like hunting, you know, we're still causing like fear and terror and stuff on them. And so,
Mhm.
and like that, I can understand the argument that that might not be fair. I rebuttal with saying that, you know, they're still gonna have other stresses to their survival, right?
Mhm.
And like, you know, if it's not gonna be a person, it's gonna be a bear or a wolf. So,
Mhm.
and the other, I guess to go back to hunting, the other thing about that is by leaving predators to do the work for us. Um, and by the way, I think it's worth noting that like you don't want like deer to overpopulate and stuff because that would be even more suffering. It's you know, because then they'll die by diseases, they'll die by starvation because there won't be enough food to go around. So I do think it's important that the deer populations are kept in check, for instance. And so, but if people aren't doing the hunting, then that means that you have this other predator that is, and that's a whole nother group of animals that um could be suffering as well, right? That don't necessarily have to be suffering. And so I think that if we're going to have deer just in general, I think we almost have a bit of an obligation to hunt them to stop that species from suffering, but then also to stop whatever alternative species that would be there from suffering.
Mhm.
I hope that makes sense because, like, you know,
Yeah, no, it did. Oh, so my thoughts on the overpopulation disease element, it seems like all animals, including humans, now that we can see with like how COVID affected New York, the more you have too many animals in one area, nature seems to thin them out by disease and whatnot. And so even before humans, the animals that were around before us, or even with humans, but animals in areas that weren't near us, yeah, it probably looked pretty devastating, like most of nature does, where something that's overpopulated gets disease, a bunch die off, and once it's not overpopulated anymore because the disease died off, then the others are fine. It just nature doing nature. And so you're right in a sense that if we can witness an area where there should be 1,000 deer and they get overpopulated to having 5,000, and because of this they get disease, and we can see that they are suffering, if it would be more beneficial to kill off a certain amount and to make those ones suffer less and the other ones not get disease, it seems reasonable to have this as a possible option. The fact that nature kind of does its own thing and suffering happens, it might, like, considering how I feel, I would want the option to maybe be one of the ones that survives. Like, I survived COVID. So I wouldn't necessarily want some aliens going, there's too many humans, we're going to pick off half of them. I'd rather it be left up to us to each try our best to survive. I don't think deer necessarily think that way. But I don't think nature needs us to help it. But I think that is a separate question within veganism, is, do we interfere with nature to help it? Do we roam nature to find like animals that have been hurt, and then we help them out and put them in like zoo type areas, or do we just let them die off like they naturally would? And so I think that's an interesting element of it. And then the other part that you said about the predators, I think if we were picking off the overpopulated deer, that actually might make it so those predators have less. So I don't know if I fully understood that part, because I think we'd be hurting them if we took a bunch of their food away.
Yeah, I'm more saying like, because like there's a lot of areas where, like people are reintroducing wolves, for instance.
Mm.
And so, which I don't know, like I don't have a strong opinion on whether, I know it's like very controversial. So, and I just don't know enough, and it seems like there's experts on both sides um that are saying different things there. So, at least that's my perception.
Mm.
But yeah, like, so I guess it's like, in terms of like a moral sense, should we reintroduce these wolves? Because that's another species now that, so when, let's say like the deer population, shrinks naturally, let's say there's like a bad winter and a big die off. Then now you have this species that wouldn't have been there before, that is also suffering, right? Because like you said, like now they don't have food either. And so like I think it's almost better to just have people do that, because we don't suffer when there's not enough deer, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like the predators would. So
Yeah.
I hope that.
Yeah, I don't know the exact answer to that, but I'll point out something that'll kind of explain my thoughts. I've never understood the concern with species going extinct. I Now in my mind, what matters, I have two things that matter. One is my survival and the survival of like my loved ones. And then my other one is the moral aspect of not letting things suffer, or not making things suffer. And so if a species needs to survive to keep me doing well, like supposedly if all of a certain type of ant died and if all of a certain type of bee died, then everything would collapse and we wouldn't have life as we know it. So that would make me not live as long as I want to live. And so I don't want that shit to happen. It's more of a selfish thing there. But let's say there's an animal that's going to go extinct, like the bald eagle, or there's certain type of rhinos. Obviously I don't want any of those to suffer unneededly, but if a certain type of rhino going extinct just means that we can't experience it anymore, I've never understood that. I don't think people are necessarily dumb or anything for caring about something going extinct, and I might be the dumb one not knowing the reason why to care. But I don't want things to suffer, but I don't care if something goes extinct unless it's bad for other things. And so as far as reintroducing something to a certain area, I do see the idea of, if we humans realize that we've taken too much land and we have made it bad for these other animals, if we want to help them repopulate, and they're native to the area and it makes sense, then to do it and to go for it. I don't know who within our government decides how much land we can take from nature versus how much it's good for us to preserve. That's such a complicated idea to me, but I just don't personally have any stake in stake in species of any kind, other than their suffering that I don't want to happen.
Yeah, and I actually kind of agree with you, and I do think that the reason, is that that people are scared of species going extinct is, you know, it's just kind of like personification almost, where you personify the species as if it were the human species, and so it kind of, I think, goes back to the fear of like, what if humanity went extinct, and so trying, you know, and so I think people are looking at it that way. I think, you know, humanity is at some point going to go extinct. I'd be willing to bet on it, and so that's not something that I think that I'm very scared of. And I mean, there's a lot of like ways that we could, like, Earth could be wiped out almost instantly, and so that's just like something like I just don't overthink it, and so yeah,
Yeah.
but and the other thing is, like, I think from an evolutionary standpoint, you know, if like species going extinct is just how it works,
Yeah.
and so if a species goes extinct, that's just nature doing its thing, doing its job. And I do think that we should do our best to not impact that any more than we have to, but I do think that it's you know, kind of inevitable, and that even if humans weren't here, you know, the earth would still be changing, and species would still be going extinct. But then what people don't talk about as much is that, you know, new species crop up where the old ones, you know, left. And so, yeah, I just think that that's how nature works. And, you know, it does suck. Like, you know, it's fun to, you know, go to zoos, which is another thing I don't really think I agree with at all, but whatever. It's, you know, or it's fun to, you know, watch Planet Earth and see all the rhinos and stuff.
Oh, definitely.
But yeah, I don't, you know, gotcha. There was something else I was gonna talk about, but I just completely. I guess I'll just pass the buck on to you, and
Yeah.
so yeah, like I'm a non-vegan, so I guess convince me.
Yeah. No, those were great questions. I really enjoyed that. And if you think of the other one, and when we do a future talk, maybe you'll have a whole new list, and we should do that. One thing I do want to do is I want to end this video without fully closing out, and then start a new one for me asking you questions. So I'll have two videos separate
Perfect.
for
Yeah.
uploading. So I'm just going to end this right